In the Kingdom of Navarre, King Ferdinand and his three closest lords, Berowne, Dumaine, and Longueville, have decided that they have had quite enough of the distractions of the world. They've decided to dedicate the next 3 years entirely to intense, solitary study. To make sure they don't slip, they've sworn a solemn oath: no women, limited sleep, and very little food. As a plan for intellectual perfection, a way to strip away the messy, unpredictable parts of being human to focus purely on the mind. But there is one man in the group who isn't entirely convinced. Berowne, the resident skeptic, watches his friends with a certain level of amusement. He privately mocks the idea that you can just switch off human nature like a faucet. He argues that the very things they are trying to avoid, passion, hunger, and the pull of companionship, are exactly what make life worth living. This tension between the lofty intellectual ideals of the king and the grounded, cynical realism of Berowne sets the stage for everything that follows. This intellectual experiment is interrupted almost immediately by the real world. The Princess of France arrives in Navarre, not for a social visit, but to negotiate a complex diplomatic situation involving a massive debt of 100,000 crowns and the status of the territory of Aquitaine. Because the king has sworn his vow to avoid women, he cannot host the princess in his palace. This creates an immediate, awkward stalemate. The men are trying to pretend they are deep in study, but their eyes are constantly drifting toward the French court. As the play progresses, the rigid structure of their vow begins to crumble under the weight of romantic chaos. We see this play out through several different layers of courtship. There's a comedic subplot involving Armado, a Spanish soldier who speaks in an incredibly flamboyant, over-the-top, and pedantic way. He has fallen head over heels for a commoner named Jaquenetta. His page, a clever boy named Moth, spends much of his time mocking Armado's grandiloquent way of speaking, which serves as a running joke about how people use language to dress up their actual feelings. But while Armado is busy with his performative, almost ridiculous romance, the tone shifts when we look at Berowne. The man who started the play mocking the idea of love finds himself completely undone by it. He falls deeply in love with Rosaline, a lady of the French court who is just as sharp-witted and formidable as he is. For Berowne, the transition from a detached observer to a man caught in the middle of a romantic storm is not a graceful one. He is caught between his intellectual pride and his sudden, overwhelming desire. The tension between the men's vows and their actual behavior eventually reaches a breaking point. A misplaced, hyperbolic love letter is discovered, causing a public scandal that exposes the hypocrisy of the group. They swore to be scholars, but they have become nothing more than men playing romantic games. Facing this failure, Berowne delivers what is perhaps the most important speech in the play. He doesn't apologize for their failure, instead he justifies it. He argues that the pursuit of love is a higher, more divine form of wisdom than the dry, lifeless study of books. He suggests that to truly understand the world, they must embrace the very passions they tried to suppress. He essentially tells the king that a man who has never loved is not a scholar, but someone who has simply failed to live. The king and his lords ultimately abandon their ascetic vows. They decide to stop studying and start competing, engaging in a series of courtly games, dances, and masks to try and win the hearts of the ladies. It feels like a typical Shakespearean comedy at this point, a series of witty repartee and romantic maneuvering. However, the play takes a sudden, unexpected turn. The light-hearted atmosphere is shattered by news of the death of the Princess of France's father. Suddenly, the stakes are no longer about who can be the most clever or who can write the best poem. The princess, mourning her father, refuses to be treated as a mere prize in a courtly game. She sees through the men's games and realizes that their sudden interest in her is just a continuation of their pursuit of pleasure. She turns the tables on them. Instead of being won over by wit or songs, she imposes a rigorous test of devotion. She tells them that if they truly love them, they must prove it through service and endurance. She demands a trial of a year and a day. The king is tasked with living in a hermitage, a solitary and difficult life of prayer and reflection. Rosaline demands that Berowne spend a year in a hospital, tasked with the impossible mission of making the sick laugh. This is where the play departs from the standard rules of Elizabethan comedy. In most plays of this era, this is the moment where the tension breaks, the characters are forgiven, and everyone gathers for a series of weddings. But in Love's Labour's Lost, there are no weddings. There is no grand celebration. Instead, the play ends in a state of suspended animation. The characters are left standing on the edge of a long, difficult journey, facing a future that is entirely uncertain. As the play closes, a symbolic song by the characters of spring and winter reminds the audience of the inevitable passage of time, leaving us to wonder if their passion will actually survive the test of a year and a day. When we look back at why Shakespeare chose this unusual path, we can see a profound exploration of the limits of language and the nature of wisdom. The play is famously dense with wordplay, puns, and literary allusions. Much of this is intentional. By filling the characters' mouths with high scholarly language and empty pedantry, Shakespeare is showing us the gap between words and reality. Armado's speech is a parody of it, the Lord's scholarly oaths are a version of it, and even the romantic poetry used to woo the ladies is a form of it. The play asks, can language ever truly capture the depth of human experience, or is it just a mask we wear to hide our confusion? There is a recurring theme here regarding the limits of rhetoric. The men try to use logic and study to control their lives, and they try to use poetry to control the women. But both methods fail. The play suggests that true wisdom isn't found in the ability to win an argument or master a complex text, but in the ability to face the messy, painful, and unscripted realities of human connection. The transition from the comedy of wit to the reality of service is the core movement of the play. It moves from the intellectual, which is safe and controlled, to the emotional, which is dangerous and unpredictable. The ending is particularly striking because it refuses to provide the comfort of a resolution. By ending with a test rather than a wedding, Shakespeare suggests that love is not a destination you reach through a clever courtship, but a continuous, difficult process of endurance. The year and a day is not just a period of time, it's a metaphor for the reality of commitment. It suggests that true devotion requires more than just the ability to speak well in the moment. It requires the ability to remain present when the games are over and the real work begins. This brings us to the tension between asceticism and desire. The king and his lords attempt to impose a rigid, scholarly order on their lives, trying to treat their own nature as something that can be mastered through willpower. But the play argues that human nature is not something to be conquered, but something to be integrated. The characters' failure to keep their vows isn't just a comedic device, it's a philosophical statement. You cannot achieve wisdom by cutting yourself off from the world. You achieve it by engaging with it, in all its complexity and its suffering. Ultimately, Love's Labour's Lost is a play about the struggle to bridge the gap between who we think we should be, the idealized intellectual versions of ourselves, and who we actually are. It challenges the idea that we can master life through intellect alone. Instead, it leaves us in that uncertain space between the spoken word and the lived experience, suggesting that the most important parts of being human are the things that cannot be captured in a poem or a lecture, but must be lived through one day at a time.